Last week you were asked about the attack on an Alawite village, Al-Zara. You said you didn't have specific information about who was responsible. The Ahrar-al-Sham group admitted to participating in the attack. The group's spokesman told Reuters, quote, "Civilians were not targeted. On the contrary, factions made great effort to spare civilians and deal with prisoners humanely." End quote. RT went to the village, and the residents there described a massacre where militants killed women and children and abducted dozens of people. Why does the U.S. insist that this group, Ahrar-al-Sham, should not be blacklisted along with al-Nusra?
We're, as I said at the outset, out of Munich, the decision by the International Syria Support Group, of which Russia is a member, and a communique that Russia signed up to, agreed, and this was more than 20 nations, agreed that the only groups that would not be party to the cessation of hostilities would be those designated as terrorist organizations by the UN. And of all the groups, now let me finish before you interrupt me, all the groups, all of the groups that are represented in Syria fighting, the two that meet that criteria, a criteria that was agreed to by everybody in the ISSG, not just the United States, ma'am, or al-Nusra, and Daesh.
Why did the U.S. fight their inclusion last week at the UN?
This was a decision made by the International Syria Support Group. Everybody agreed that al-Nusra and Daesh, because they're designated by the UN as foreign terrorist organizations, would not be party to the cessation. And so that's where we are today.
The U.S. fights at the UN not to include this.
I'm not going to get into internal deliberations one way or the other. I'm telling you, look, you're putting, I love how you do this. Try to put everything on the United States.
Ahrar-al-Sham, a rebel group that you guys have fought with the Russians to keep off of the banned list, to keep them included in the ceasefire, along with al-Nusra fighters, stormed this Alawite village.
Yeah.
How is it that, they look like they are operating as one and the same, a group that you insist is not a terrorist group and a group that you insist is a terrorist group. How do you explain that? And when, if ever, are you going to tell them that they're in danger of being unincluded in the cessation of hostilities?
Look, you're putting, I love how you do this. Try to put everything on the United States. The International Syria Support Group is a international community. It represents the international community. Iran is a member. Russia is a member. Saudi Arabia. I could go on and on and on. All of them collectively made this decision. And so your question should be posed to all the members of the ISSG. Bottom line is that even Russia agreed that the only groups that would not be party to the cessation are members designated by terrorist organizations of the UN. I've said that now 3 times in response to your follow-ups. The only other thing I would say is, regardless of who was responsible for this attack, there's no excuse for killing innocent civilians. None whatsoever. The whole reason why we wanted the cessation of hostilities put in place was so that violence against innocent Syrian people would not occur. And sadly, it is still occurring.
What does the U.S. do to address what happened last week?
We are working with all the members of the ISSG, which, as I said, includes
Is the U.S.
Russia.
in touch with this?
We are working with all members of the ISSG to use the appropriate amount of influence that they have. Some of that influence is influence we have over groups in Syria to get everybody to abide by the cessation.
But have you told them that if they don't stop doing this kind of stuff, that they're going to be excluded and they will become legitimate targets?
Well, we have not. I don't want to get into.
And if you haven't, why haven't you?
I don't want to get into specific conversations or illusions of threats here. We have certainly made clear and done so consistently our expectations for the opposition groups, those that are part of the HNC and the armed opposition. We have made very clear our expectations for their behavior and conduct with respect to the cessation of hostilities. And